So, one of my panel tonight, Josh Howie, was asked by one of his children last year if he knew that there were over 100 different sexes. It turns out the child had been at a session run by Keshet UK, which is an education and training charity with a mission to ensure that Jewish LGBT plus people and their families are included throughout Jewish life in the UK. That's a direct quote from them. Now, Josh decided to ask a few questions about this, and he's back with me now to tell me what he found out. Josh, welcome back to the show. We're talking about Keshet UK. So do you want to tell us who they are and what they do?
So they're an LGBT plus organisation. As you said, you read sort of their manifesto, and I agree with it. Of course, I want LGBT young people and their families to feel welcome and part of the Jewish community, which they are. But this is what, in my experience, as a parent of 5 and with children from age 6 to 14 within these Jewish schools and institutions and synagogue, is that I believe Keshet UK is the main means by which gender ideology is being spread amongst young Jewish kids.
What specifically are they telling the kids?
Well, this is the hard bit. This is what I can't get. So that session happened last year. It was for my 9-year-old and my 11-year-old. They're 1 year apart, and they had like this afternoon session where they were taught this 100 sexes thing. They were also taught or told about pansexuals and various other things. And I immediately emailed the school and I was like, well, what exactly was taught?
Yes.
The facilitator or the person who was like liaison there said she was very adamant that she'd never heard 100 sexes. I'm like, well, was it 100 genders? Like both my kids were very adamant that it was 100 sexes that they'd heard.
Well, 100 sexes is just plain factually wrong.
Absolutely.
100 genders is an ideological faith. And again, it's contested.
Either way.
So either way, there are problems here,
Absolutely.
Right?
And I was like, OK, well, can you get me some slides? Can you tell me exactly what it is? And they were like, yeah, we'll get it for you. And then I kept on asking. And then eventually they're like, no, I'm afraid that we can't actually get it because it's sort of private intellectual property or whatever. Then a couple of months ago, my now 12-year-old, who was then 11, was in synagogue doing bar mitzvah classes, and he had a 2-hour session with a video from a trans woman talking about her journey into being a trans woman, and then they were discussing some passage, and then again they were talking about all these passages and stuff. Now, I don't believe Keshet UK provided the information for that one, but I queried with the synagogue. They sent the information off to Keshet UK, who then said twice, supposedly, yes, this material is appropriate for 10-year-old girls.
I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by this because they would have thought that religious groups, synagogues, for instance, like you mentioned, I've spoken to a Baptist minister in America who says that woke politics is coming into their church and they're doing stuff about intersectional readings of the Bible. But why is it that this belief system has the power to infect established religious groups?
Because the leaders of our institutions have taken their eye off the ball and they want to be good and kind like every human being wants to be. And they think that this organisation knows their stuff. This is what they were set up for. And they trust them to come in and they trust them with my children, with our community's children. And I just want to say a very quick thing here that as we saw from the CAS report, autistic kids are a much higher rate to go through this process to become down gender ideology, a much higher risk, and there's a very high causation of autism in the Jewish community, much higher than the national average. So Jewish kids are particularly at risk. I know families whose children have been going through this. So I think it's partly our leaders of our institutions, frankly, taking their eyes off the ball. And it's so frustrating as just a parent. Like this, of course, is part of my job, but my day-to-day life is spent with the kids, and I'm just trying to find out what they have learned.
So this is one of the problems, because I spoke to Councillor Sam Murray earlier today, and she was talking about how when she was asking for details about sex education at her school, her primary school, her kids' primary school, they were saying they couldn't reveal it, and eventually she saw it and was able to withdraw her kids. Is that something that people should be doing, that Jewish parents should be doing as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like in this, the gender wars, or whatever you want to call it, the argument has been won. The CAS report is now out, and then also the government now has provided this guidance saying that children should not be taught this stuff.
Yeah.
But the war is not won because it's embedded, it's there, it's happening. And I saw that interview with Sat, and then she's saying at the end that parents can say enough is enough. It's too late. Like, this has already happened a bunch of times.
And the problem is a lot of people are trying, or activists particularly, are trying to dismiss the Cass review, this rigorous 4-year review, which comes out with a very compassionate overview. I mean, it's not at all what they've described. One comedian described it as far right, for goodness sake.
Yeah, and it's so frustrating. So, people want an easy life. I get it.
Yeah.
And also, people just sort of take buzzwords that they see from the media, as you say, far right or bigoted or whatever it is, and people also want to feel good about themselves. Helen Joyce, that she did that. There's a clip where she says that the parents will never let go of this ideology because of trans kids, because otherwise it would be to accept that they had been part of their children's lives being ruined, essentially. Yes. But I think that it's just further than that. In that, I feel like anybody who's bought into this, through ego, they will just not allow themselves to reevaluate the information. And when it is our children who are at risk, I mean, the frustration here, because I've been dealing with this, not just dealing with people online and the usual public sphere of all of this, but dealing with this at home, within these institutions, within my synagogue, within my kids' school, which are brilliant in all other ways. But when you're trying to explain this stuff, and it seems to be, like I say, coming from this organisation that doesn't seem to have accountability. Keshet UK worked with the chief rabbi on a report for helping schools, and one of the things that they came up with together was that schools could withhold from parents if children were changing their gender identity.
Well, that's not in accordance with the guidelines that the government's issuing.
Absolutely. So, but that was what came through. So all I want to know is, what are you actually teaching? And if you are teaching this gender ideology stuff, stop. Please. I want kids, trans kids, anybody to feel safe and at home within the Jewish community. But what I don't want is my kids to be brainwashed. At least, I mean, they can be brainwashed with God and all that, but I don't want to be brainwashed. Some forms of indoctrination are fine. That's all good, but if you're going to do the brainwashing, just stick to the remit of that stuff. And it just takes up so much time and emails and meetings with people. And I just want to I'm just a lazy person. I just want to trust that my kids are safe, and they're not. And then this week, this thing was published in the Jewish Chronicle talking about the Keshet UK, and then my now 10-year-old, he had a thing called the Anne Frank Trust, and he goes into this 2-day session all about discrimination. Again, I want my kids to treat everyone equally. Yes. Of course I do. What's the first thing they do? Write out your pronouns. Write out if you're non-binary or other, and then they spend the rest of the day talking about non-binary and comparing it to being black, disabled, Jewish. That is not an inherent characteristic. OK, well, Josh, thanks. Josh is very clearly rightly wound up about this. We do have a statement from Keshet UK, which I will read after the break, because I think we need to hear that side of the story as well. But look, there is plenty more to come on Free Speech Nation this evening. I'm going to be talking to Maya Forstarter and Michael Foran about the ERCC ruling about whistleblowers who allege affirmative action is taking